In 1867, Russia sold the territory of Alaska to the U.S. for $7.2 million. And merely 50 years later, the Americans had earned that amount back 100 times over. How could the imperial officials have given up such a choice parcel? Many people still think that the Americans either stole Alaska from the Russians or the territory was leased and wasn't returned to the rightful owner, Russia. It is interesting to note that despite the speculation surrounding the matter, the deal was an honest one and both sides had valid reasons. In the 19th century, Alaska was a center of international trade. In the capital, Novoarchangельsk, now known as Sitka, merchants traded Chinese fabrics, tea, and even ice, which the southern United States needed before the invention of the refrigerator. Ships and factories were built, and coal was mined. Selling this land seemed like madness. However, it was both a practical and geopolitical move. Russian merchants in Alaska were mainly interested in walrus ivory. It was as expensive as elephant ivory, and the valuable sea otter fur, which could be procured by trading with the indigenous people. Trading was done by the Russian-American Company, RAC, which was started by the adventurers, 18th-century Russian businessmen, courageous travelers, and entrepreneurs. The company controlled all of Alaska's mines and minerals. It could independently enter into trade agreements with other countries. These privileges were granted to the company by the imperial government. The government not only collected massive taxes from the company, it also owned a large part of it. There are a number of reasons that led to the selling of Alaska to the United States. Alaska was hard to defend after being defeated by the British in the Crimean War. The Russians needed funds to protect themselves in the future. Considering the distance between the European Russia and Alaska, Russia feared that Alaska would be easily captured in any future battle with a strong maritime power like Great Britain. Therefore Emperor Alexander II opted to sell the colony. There were very few permanent Russian residents in Alaska, with most of the population being temporary workers and administrators. The Russian-American Company, RAC, was no longer profitable. The colony prospered under Alexander Baranov, and the fur trade thrived. The naval governors who took over the company after Baranov expanded the company's influence to River Yukon, where they looked for another type of fur. After exhausting the fur trade and reducing the population of sea otters by the 1850s, the RAC had no source of income and started depending on supplies from Russia. The logistics were difficult to make work because of how isolated Alaska was. Once the Crimean War began, Turkey, France and Britain stood between Russia and Alaska. It became clear that they could not send supplies to the colony. As a result, the living conditions became difficult and unsustainable. Lack of natural resources. The main trade in the territory was fur business, and by the time Russia was selling Alaska to the United States, there were few natural resources. Gold and oil were not discovered yet. Lastly, the Russian government needed gold after the ruinous Crimean War a decade earlier. They chose to sell Alaska to the United States because it essentially ensured that Alaska wouldn't fall to the British, with whom Russia was not on the best of terms at the time. It is safe to conclude that the lack of resources and difficult living conditions in Alaska forced Russia to sell the colony.